The time I have been talking about all morning is finally here. It's the seventh day of World Breastfeeding Week 2024 with the theme Closing the Gap. Breastfeeding support for all. Now, this campaign was built to celebrate breastfeeding mothers in all their diversity throughout their breastfeeding journeys while showcasing the ways families, societies, communities, and health workers can have the back of every breastfeeding mother. Now, breastfeeding is one of the most effective ways to ensure child health and survival. Yet, currently, like I said on Monday, fewer than half of infants under 6 months old are exclusively breastfed. Why? That's a big question. Joining us and joining me to discuss this morning from UNICEF Nigeria is the Chief of Nutrition. She's Nemat Hajeeboy. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for
Thank
having me
you.
here.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Super excited to talk about this. How has it been so far? Looking at, let's go back a bit. Last year, we celebrated World Breastfeeding Week. Now, looking at the numbers from that point till now, would you say we've made progress?
So, the way we measure breastfeeding is, through surveys, and these surveys are not necessarily done every year.
All right.
So, the last survey data we have is from 2021, and we compare it to 2017, which is the same survey and data points. And I would say, yes, we have made progress. But I'll also step back a little, like you
Okay.
did, to
Okay.
say when we talk about breastfeeding, it's a big term. But when we talk about what is called optimal breastfeeding, we're talking about three things. The first is mothers must be supported to initiate breastfeeding within an hour. The second thing we talk about is exclusive breastfeeding, that is only giving breast milk for the first 6 months of
Of
a
life.
child's life. And the third thing we talk about is continuing to breastfeed for up to 2 years. But after 6 months, the mother should introduce some diverse foods, semi solid foods for the child. So these are the three quote unquote indicators we track. On the first one, I'm sorry to say we haven't made progress. We're
Okay.
actually backsliding. So, to give you a data point, we used to be at 33% and now we're at 23%.
So
So, we've gone back.
So that's for
Early
in early
initiation.
initiation. Immediately the baby comes out of the womb, initiation should happen
Absolutely. Immediately put the child
to
on the
breast.
mother's breast and
Mm.
let the child start to
Suckle.
feed. Yes. Now, when we talk about exclusive breastfeeding, that is only giving only breast milk for the first 6 months, we're doing well. We've moved forward.
Okay.
So we used to be at 24%, now we're at 34%. But remember that by next year, according to the World Health Assembly, we should be at 50%.
That's right.
So we need to
Like
run,
racetrack to
run.
that point.
And then on continued breastfeeding, again, we're backsliding. So we used to be at 37%, now we're at 26%.
All right.
So we're doing really well on the exclusivity, but not so good on the other two. But I do want to give a shout out to all those mothers out there, because over 90% of Nigerian mothers breastfeed. And that is huge in itself
Okay,
compared
alright.
to any other country.
All right. Now, coming with those numbers, what would you say, with your experience, has been the major factor that has restricted women from, or rather, restricted the entire idea of breastfeeding at the initiation stage, the exclusive stage, and also with supplementary feeding?
So many reasons, but I'll name top few.
Okay.
One, when a mother gives birth, she must be supported by health workers. So we're seeing more and more women are having their deliveries assisted, which is by a skilled birth attendant or going to a facility. But we need to make sure that the health workers respond immediately and put the child to the breast. So we need to train our health workers and track this. We're not really doing that well right now.
All
So
right.
if we change that, because if any mother will tell you, if I'm in a hospital giving birth, I listen to what the nurse or the doctor is saying,
That's
even
right.
if I know the information.
Mm-hmm.
So on this, I hold our health workers responsible, accountable, and we must make them supportive.
Okay.
On the exclusive breastfeeding, it's more about the support that a mother gets. And I'll name two key things. One, our sociocultural beliefs. So especially in Nigeria, when it can get hot in summer, 35, 40, 45 degrees, we feel thirsty. And as adults, we believe, oh, we've eaten food, we need to drink water. So many times the belief is, oh, I've breastfed my child, I need to give the child a
Water.
teaspoon or a
That's
little
right.
bit. So water, we're seeing that the biggest barrier to exclusive breastfeeding is water. 30% of mothers are giving some form of water to a child in the first 6 months. If those mothers instead believe that their breast milk, which is true, has enough water and they don't need to give enough water, we'll surpass the
Okay.
50% target we
All
have.
right.
And with the other barriers, you're here, you're a working woman, I'm
Yes.
here, I'm a
Yes.
working
Yeah.
woman. As working mothers, we need to support our mothers to get the leave that they need. So, paid maternity leave, as you know, in Nigeria is roughly only about 3 months.
Yes.
Only 8 states in the country, and I have to give a shout out to Cross Rivers. They were the most recent
Okay.
state
To
last
inaugurate
week
that. That's good.
to give 6 months paid maternity leave.
Amazing.
So, if I'm a working woman and I have to come back in 3 months, I mean, it is really difficult for me to continue to
To breastfeed.
exclusively breastfeed
That's
because
correct.
at workspaces also we don't have a safe space that I can go express milk and take it home.
Yes.
So gradually my milk production will decline. So, socio-culturally supporting the mother not to give water, and at the workplace ensuring she has enough paid maternity leave and a safe space to express and store her milk. And that is also important for the continued breastfeeding. So after 6 months, if I come back to work and I don't have a safe space, and many people say, but you can go to the toilet. And I'll ask you, do you take your food to the toilet?
No, I don't.
So why would
And
I
I want
want to
to press
go
my
and
my milk in the
my
toilet.
milk, which is for a very precious little baby?
Yes.
So, we need, and you don't need much space. I always say you need 10 square meters of love. That's
Yeah,
all you
that's all
need.
you need.
So those are the big, big reasons.
Challenges. All right,
Yes.
that's interesting to note. Now, as UNICEF, what initiatives have you put in place? Coming from 2023, celebrating from the first to the seventh today marks the end. But what are the initiatives you've put in so far that would help to move up the rates of breastfeeding in Nigeria?
So, as UNICEF or as any UN agency, our mandate is to support and work with the government.
First of all,
So we are doing what I call three big things in partnership with the government. The first is on the policy and the guidelines and the law. So, like, working with the federal government, working with state governments, working with the first ladies
okay.
to make sure that paid maternity leave state by state is extended. So, like I said, Cross Rivers is to be congratulated.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, last year we had Kwara, the first lady of Kwara was there and announced that paid maternity leave was extended. So that's what we're doing. The second piece is on what we call strengthening the system. So, working with the Ministry of Health, especially to ensure that all health workers get trained, that we track early initiation, especially, and make sure that mothers, if they're giving birth at home with an attendant or in the facility, I hope, with with a nurse or a doctor in attendance, that the child is put to the breast immediately. And I would say to all mothers listening, and actually to all fathers who are there, make sure that your baby is put to the mother's
Breast.
breast
Okay.
immediately.
Okay.
And then the last thing we're doing is working with the ministry on social behavior change campaign. So last week, as you know, on the 1st of August, Nigeria, I hope, has broken most of the world records on the number of women who simultaneously breastfed. We have over 31,000 mothers
Mm.
across the country. It was
Oh,
phenomenal,
that's beautiful.
breastfeeding at the same time at
Mm.
12 o'clock
At 12
sharp.
o'clock
At
sharp.
12 o'clock. So,
Okay.
it shows that our mothers are supportive, our communities are supportive. We just need to tweak the behaviors to make it a little more optimal. Remember, 90% of mothers are
In
breastfeeding
Nigeria, and
in
that's a good
Nigeria.
number.
It's
It's
huge. It's
huge.
huge.
It's
It's
huge.
huge.
Now, we cannot talk about breastfeeding without talking about the benefits of breastfeeding. Now, let's talk about the long-term benefits of breastfeeding for a child's cognitive development. What are some of them?
So you hit the nail on the head. I'm always asked, why is breast milk or breastfeeding important?
Yes.
And I say, we forget that we are mammals. We're human beings are mammals. And what classifies us as mammals is we breastfeed our young. And the reason we breastfeed our young is because the child's development when in the womb is not complete. A lot of that development happens even after the child is born. And that development is facilitated by the ingredients in breast milk. So the nutrients, the hormones, and all the other good stuff, the antibodies. And I'd say two big things that we need to remember. One is the brain is not fully developed when the child is born. So, as you said, cognitive development.
Development.
Breast milk has the enzymes, hormones needed to complete that development. So, world over, we see that breastfed children tend to do better than children who are not breastfed or do not have access to breast milk. The second important thing, which I think is not talked about as much, is the development of the gut and the stomach.
Okay.
And this is very important because this has both short-term impact, because that child is less likely to get diarrhea and or all the other infections associated. And long-term too, that child will have less problems as an adult.
Adult.
So, I mean, to me it's a miracle substance. If I was
Yeah.
told today, here's a pill or here's a vaccine, have it, that will give
Mm.
you all these benefits,
I'll rush it.
I would stand in line
Of
for it,
course,
right?
of
But
course.
we unfortunately don't do that.
So with breast milk, you get all of that, and it's
100%.
free of charge.
It's free of charge, but we have to look after our mothers and support
Mothers,
them. Yeah. So I
exactly.
always say, I personally don't like the term saying it's free,
Okay,
because the mother has to be taken care of, and we
for
need
her
to,
to
as I
produce
say,
milk,
well, for her to produce it, so she should be relaxed, she should be well taken
take
care
care
of,
of. Okay.
etc. I'll make one more point, and we can talk about it. But besides the benefits to the child, there's a huge benefits, short term and long term, to the mother. So I
Yeah, please
can,
go ahead.
okay.
Yes.
So the short term benefit is the minute the mother starts breastfeeding, if she starts to do it in the delivery room, it helps to contract the uterus and
Yes.
stop postpartum bleeding.
Bleeding.
So it helps her to recover faster, immediately, like in the first 2, 3 days. The second thing it helps is, when you're pregnant, you put on weight.
Yes.
That weight is put on so that the mother's body can produce breast milk to feed the child, because your body takes from all the stores.
Yes.
So a breastfeeding mother will lose her pregnancy weight faster than a non-breastfeeding mother, and her body recovers faster. And then last but not the least is it protects from certain types of cancers, particularly breast
Breast
cancer
cancer.
and ovarian cancer. So, I mean, think of a substance that you know of. I actually don't know. I've tried to rack my head, that has a benefit for both the provider and the receiver.
Mm.
So by breastfeeding, I'm benefiting myself as well
Is
as
the
my
baby.
child.
So breastfeeding is a miracle.
It is.
If we can say it is a miracle for the
Absolutely.
baby and for the mother. And in talking about society at large, what's the impact of breastfeeding in a society?
So, absolutely, as I was going to say, it's the benefit to the mother, the child, and society at large. These are children or members of our society that will be healthier, smarter, more productive
Definitely.
in life, so
Mm.
contributing to the economy. And I would say just generally happier. When a mother and child breastfeed, there's a bond, there's an emotion that's created. So the benefits are huge. There are calculations done that there's a cost of not breastfeeding to the world is like some $300 billion. I mean,
Mm.
don't quote me on
Yeah.
it, but
Okay.
it's huge, the cost of not breastfeeding.
Breastfeeding.
And, you know, we know that food and food security is a big issue we talk about a lot these days. Imagine if there are 8 million babies born in Nigeria every year. If those 90% of those mothers are not breastfeeding, we would also have to produce that much more food to feed our most vulnerable. So
Yes.
there's a huge food security
Mm.
angle to it. And last, I'd say we talk about climate and climate change. And breastfeeding is one of the most climate friendly things we could do, because I'm not using a bottle, a can, a tin, wasting water. It like we
It's
say,
natural.
everything is natural. The packaging
It's
is
natural.
natural, the production is natural. There
Yes.
is little or no waste, from
Yes.
it. So it is one of the most climate friendly options that we have.
Okay. Now, still speaking about, let's focus a bit on exclusive breastfeeding. There was a campaign last year, largely, even it ran on the station here, where they talked about, oh, exclusive breastfeeding, and sometimes I hear people react to it and say, oh, exclusive breastfeeding is good, but it's
Of
difficult.
course.
It's not easy to
Mhm.
exclusively breastfeed. Even for me,
Mhm.
I remember when I was breastfeeding, I come down with a lot of pains
Mhm.
with my back.
Mhm.
I know there are ways to do it, but
Right.
it's not always convenient.
No,
I
no.
would, I would, I'll put that in
Yeah.
quotes. Now, what advice do you prefer, at this point, for breastfeeding to happen, exclusive breastfeeding to happen? The mother has to be in some form of, comfort
Mhm.
somehow.
Mhm.
When the pains come, how do they deal with it and then continue exclusive breastfeeding?
Absolutely. So, like I said, our tagline for breastfeeding is always protect, promote,
Mm.
support. The protect, like I said, is the laws, the policies we have. But the other two, promote and support, are critical. First thing we can all do is to make sure that we give love to the mothers,
Okay.
support them and get them relaxed. Whether you're a health worker, a mother in law, a father, a brother, uncle, whoever, an older sibling,
Yes.
everybody, we need to get our mothers relaxed and supported and feel loved. So if she has an issue breastfeeding, don't tell her immediately, oh, switch, your child is hungry. Say, no, relax. You
Mm.
will produce milk.
Mm.
I always tell mothers, production of milk is like a traffic light. The minute the child gets to the breast, the mother's brain gets a green signal saying start to produce
Okay.
milk, and the milk gets let down. But imagine if that traffic light is not working and there's stress and there's an electricity outage. So these are all these stresses. Then that traffic light will not change to green. It will keep remaining at red or keep
Okay.
blinking
Amber.
yellow.
Yes.
And, the child will not get breast milk. So first, let's give love, let's give support. Two, as health workers, those who are the more professionally trained, we need to help mothers resolve their problems. Some mothers may have inverted nipples, some may experience pain, some may have engorged breasts. So, seek to the mothers and fathers, seek medical help. It's not difficult. You shouldn't be ashamed or worried. And to the health workers, let's support our mothers. It's very easy things you can do to resolve those issues. And the last piece I would say is, as society, we need to make sure, and I love that being in Nigeria because it's beautiful. I travel all around the country. Mothers should feel free to breastfeed anywhere,
Anywhere.
anytime. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing to be ashamed. You want to cover up, you cover up. You don't want to cover up, don't cover up.
Yes.
It's let's support our mothers to breastfeed
To breastfeed.
anywhere, anytime.
All right. Now we've looked at the mothers and the support system. Let's talk about what the government can do better. Now you mentioned that Cross River recently just extended paid leave for mothers to 6 months. What more can states do, and also the federal government, to help these policies and take that number to where we want it to be by
Mhm.
next year? What can how can they contribute?
So I would say one is, I hope, like I said, there's only 8 states with the addition of Cross River out of our 36 plus the federal capital territory that have paid maternity leave. So the number one thing that government can do, because this is in government's hands, is to change the policy
Change policy.
and have a uniform policy. Otherwise, as a mother, working mother, I'd go to Cross River, go to Lagos, and say, let me go to the states where I get 6 months
Oh
paid leave.
yes.
So that's the first thing they can do. The second thing, the government is responsible for providing a large part of the healthcare in the country, and setting the standard for what that healthcare should look like. So it's getting the policies and guidelines. So whether you go to a government facility or a private facility, it should be non-negotiable that that facility is what we call breastfeeding friendly. So when a child is born, the child should be kept in the same room as the mother, not separated, put in a nursery, etc. So this is the guidelines. The third thing is to make sure that health workers are trained properly so that they're able to provide the service. And the last I'd say is government should track and talk about it. We find that there isn't enough attention perhaps given to the issue of breastfeeding of all the different types.
Mm.
So let's make sure that we elevate the discourse and the conversation around breastfeeding, because I am certain that if all of this is done, then by next year, Nigeria can hit the 50% mark, and by 2030, hit the 70%
That's
mark.
mark.
I think if any country can show it, I think it's
It's
Nigeria.
Nigeria. Okay, so that's a good one, and that's a good call. I agree with you, both at the state and the federal level. Now, this week, still celebrating World Breastfeeding Week. What were some of the myths, misconceptions that you had to deal with? Or we can actually take it back a bit. What were some of the myths and misconceptions way back when you came to Nigeria that you have seen change over time, that people have totally trashed?
Mhm.
And what are some of them that are still prevalent, that still need to be trashed?
So I think one of the changes that we're seeing is more and more mothers. So when I arrived in Nigeria in 2021, but I have been coming and going from Nigeria since 2016.
Okay.
So if we look at the numbers that were there in 2016, we were only at 18, 19%, if I remember right, of exclusive breastfeeding. So we jumped from there to like 29%, and then now to 34%. So we've seen a good change. And I think the belief that breast milk is better than infant formula is one that is now prevailing and has changed. So
Okay.
we that's a good thing, and we need to continue. The difficult one is the
Is
water.
the water.
Yeah.
I
And there is a
suspected.
temptation to give even a spoon of water to the child, or two spoons. And I just want to say, this is not unique to Nigeria. It's all across West Africa. I've seen it in India, which is where I'm from. I've seen it in Southeast Asia. So it is saying, hey, mother's milk has water, and if you're worried, drink a glass of water yourself. Your child will get that
You'll
water
get that
through the
water.
breast milk. So
Okay.
don't worry. What you need to track is the child peeing enough. So if the child wets their diapers, 7, 8, 9 times a day, it means your child is hydrated. If
Okay.
the child is only wetting the diaper 1 or 2 times, then you need to either increase the amount you're breastfeeding and or seek medical advice.
Okay.
So, that's what we should be tracking, not the fact that, oh, my child's lips are dry.
Dry.
So I think that's a change we need to see. The sticky one for me, which I don't understand, is why we are backsliding on the early initiation,
Mm.
because we're seeing more and more mothers, the births. So we used to have skilled birth attendance at 43%. Today it's over 50%. So if more and more mothers are getting support at the time of birth, then why are we not seeing that trend? So it's a
Early
missed
initiation. Yeah.
early initiation. So to me, it's a missed opportunity,
Okay.
because if I'm there, the first thing I would do is to put the
The
baby
baby
on
to
a
breast.
on the mother's stomach.
Okay.
Remember that it's not just for breastfeeding. By doing that, the baby has skin to skin contact with the mother. I always tell people the baby has been in this very safe womb environment. When the child is born, it's quite a traumatic experience for the child. That child needs to feel secure, and the best way to make the child feel secure is to put the child on the mother's stomach, because the child is familiar with the mother's heartbeat, is familiar with the mother's smell, so the child derives comfort. So we see that the heart rate comes down, the temperature gets regulated, and then the child gets the nourishment. So that skin to skin contact in that first hour of birth is
It's
critical for
critical.
the child.
All right. Now, as we wrap up, because it's 10:30 already, but so far we've had an amazing conversation. Speaking with you, Nemat Hajeeboy. What would be your final words? Taking this action plan, because the theme for this year is closing the gap, closing the gap. Breastfeeding support for all, regardless of a woman's diversity,
Mhm.
she has a right to breastfeed her
Mhm.
baby. So, what are we taking home from that this year?
So you took my punchline. I was going to say we do need to close the gap,
Close the gap.
right? So
Yeah.
if I have 50% of mothers being supported by a health worker, but only 40% early, let's close the gap.
Let's close the
All
gap.
mothers supported must be initiating early. If I'm seeing only 30% of children being exclusively breastfed, but I know that 90% of mothers are breastfeeding, that's a 60% difference.
Yes,
Let's
let's
close
close the
that
gap.
gap. So I think closing the gap and having what I call an all of society approach, government, employers, families, communities, religious leaders, everybody needs to talk about it and help us close the gap. So by next year, I'm actually anxiously waiting for data to come out in the next 2 months,
Okay,
because a survey was done in May, June this year. So we'll know if we're heading in the right
for
direction. And
sure.
I'm keeping my fingers crossed that
That
we
we
are,
are.
that
All
we
right.
are.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Bringing this very happy numbers to us. It's a good thing. It shows that we're making progress, that we're going somewhere, and also letting us know where we're lacking behind is very important as well. So even mothers know, who are, those who are pregnant, those who have had children, will talk about this and say, please
Mhm,
ensure that your baby is put to breast immediately
mhm,
the baby is born. So that's a good thing. And also for the supplementary feeding is something we also probably need to look at and still close the gap, like you
mhm,
said. Exclusive breastfeeding, yeah, I agree with the paid leave extension to
mhm,
6 months.
mhm.
It makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for pointing all of that out. We'll definitely look into it. I hope we do look into it as a country, but personally we can play our part. It's not
Absolutely.
just the government. Thank you so much. We've been speaking to Chief of Nutrition, UNICEF Nigeria, Nemat Hajeeboy. We appreciate you for joining us on Classic FM this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.